So the end of this week's Parshas Beshalach, we have the war, the confrontation between us and the nation of Amalek. We know that after Hashem takes us out of Egypt, so all the nations are terrified of us. They wouldn't think twice about confronting us, about attacking us, except for Amalek. Amalek attacks us. So it's interesting. Moshe Rabbeinu, upon seeing the war coming, he designates Yeshua ben Nun, his student, Yeshua ben Nun, to go wage the war, to be in the the commander-in-chief of the army. And so the question is, why Moshe Rabbeinu, why did he choose Yeshua? Why not himself? Why didn't he go himself to war? It's not that he couldn't fight. We find later on in the wars against Og and Sichon, the conquest of the Jordan, Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in the fighting. So why is it that with Amalek, he doesn't do it himself? He designates his student Yeshua ben Nun. So Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin says an amazing thing. He says like this: we know that eventually when Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, Yeshua ben Nun is appointed as the next leader. Why? Why Yeshua? What was unique about him over all the other disciples, all the other students of Moshe Rabbeinu? Why is Yeshua chosen to be the one to take over the leadership? So the Gemara says a fascinating thing. The Gemara says that Yeshua ben Nun was chosen because whenever Moshe Rabbeinu gave a shir, whenever he gave a lecture, so he had many students in the room listening to Moshe Rabbeinu. When the shir was over, everyone closes the sefer, and gets up and leaves. Yeshua ben Nun stayed behind to put all the svarim back, to set up the chairs, and to set up the room for the next shir. So says the Gemara, because Yeshua ben Nun was meshamish, because he organized the room and cleaned up after the shir and set up for the next one, that's why he was chosen to be the next leader of the Jewish people. So it says Rav Tzadok, I don't understand, that's a very nice thing, don't get me wrong, it's a very, very beautiful thing to clean up and to set up, but because of that you become the leader of the Jewish people. So it says Rav Tzadok like this. He says, when the difference between Yeshua ben Nun and the other students was as follows. Everyone that goes to the shir, they're there for one thing, right? They're there to learn the information that's being presented. That's why you go to a shir. And there's nothing indicating anything more than that. They just want to get the information that's being transmitted in the shir itself. But Yeshua ben Nun stays behind preparing for the next shir. You know what that means? That means Yeshua ben Nun was expressing not only his desire and his thankfulness in the learning of that actual shir itself, but Yeshua ben Nun was expressing his desire to know everything. He was expressing his desire to become a big Talmid Chacham, to be like his Rebbe. He wasn't limiting his vision just to that particular moment, that particular shir. He had bigger visions in mind. The idea of Yeshua ben Nun setting up for the next year, cleaning up after the room and setting up for the next year, brings home the value and the greatness of wanting to be great in the future. Not only being defined in terms of what you've accomplished so far, but Yeshua ben Nun therefore represents the significance of a Jew who wants to be great. And says Rav Tzadok HaKohen, this is the battle between us and Amalek. See, Amalek, besides being a nation, Amalek is also an idea. The concept of Amalek is that a Jew, who you are, is purely defined based on what you've accomplished. And whenever a Jew looks at oneself based on their concrete accomplishments, there's always shortcomings, there's always a failure, there's always something left to be desired. And so how do we overcome Amalek? How do we overcome those doubts that plague us? Those thoughts of, well, look at what you've done until now, and compared to what you think you should have accomplished, you're nothing, you're worthless. The answer is, the antidote to that is Yeshua ben Nun. Yeshua ben Nun means to not underestimate the significance of wanting to be great. A Jew is certainly, there's a certain part of us which is defined based on what we've accomplished. But we're also defined based on what we want to accomplish. And that's Yeshua ben Nun. Because Yeshua ben Nun embodies that quality, that idea of taking what one wants to be as significant, so he's the one that brings us into Israel, he's the one that conquers and defeats Amalek. And that's what we have to take away in this week's Parsha, to realize the significance of wanting to be great. Whether it works out or not, again, that's up to God and it's up to how much effort we put in. But don't underestimate how important it is to want to be great. So Hashem should help that we should come to Shabbos with that perspective, with that strength, that confidence, and both individually and collectively, we should be zeichet to see the redemption of our people. B'pias kol tzedek, meher v'meinu, amen.
Thank you, Hashem.